here. Yeah, I love going for alcoholics. Yeah, just kind of vital. My sobriety date, September 2nd, in '84. Um, More important, the home group I go to, my home group is the Series group in Fairfax. We meet tonight. They are guys are getting on in 8 minutes. And how we open it up is we talk about what we've done for the last 7 days. Because if I've been for a meaningful lot, if I have just been screwing off for the last 90 days. Right. So for in the last 7 days, I've gone to 5 meetings consistently. I wake up, I do a gratitude list in my head in bed. And then I always start with coffee, but then I've got a stack of books, and the whole that process is all about me connecting with this higher power that's come as a result of me connecting with God. And then I set an alarm on my phone for every 2 hours throughout the rest of the day. Because I don't know about you guys, but like I'll be rock solid walking out the door, like totally connected, just in the sunlight of spirit. And then life turns left, and then next thing you know, I'm off. Like I call it out of the God mode, right? So I set that alarm so that I reset every 2 hours, and it just works for me. Oftentimes, it's not necessary, but I do it for when it is, and I've forgotten. Yeah, I make a ton of phone calls up chain, ton of phone calls down the chain. In all the meetings I go to, I have my finger on the pulse of newcomer community. Like if I'm not aware of, the majority of the newcomers that are coming into the meetings I go to, I'm missing the big picture. I'm a huge fan of the 10-step, and I'll talk about that as we roll into 4. So in the last 7 days, I'm hitting AA on all cylinders. A week ago, last Friday, there was a disturbance in the forest, and I'll talk about how I wrote that out. I wrote out 4-step, and so I could talk about the practicalities and the logistics of this, but I'm gonna do a little 4th, and you're gonna hear my 5th, right? All right, so let's just talk about. I don't know where you guys left off last week, but whenever I'm working with a guy, we go back and we just do a little recap on the step that we started with, right? So we're read a little bit about 3 because it sets everything up, right? So we had given ourselves to God, right? We had that big surrender. And it says on the very, very bottom of 63, next we launched into a course of vigorous action. The first step which is a personal house cleaning, which many of us had never attempted. Through our decision, though our decision was vital and a crucial step, it would have little permanent effect unless at once followed by strenuous effort to face and be rid of the things in ourselves that have been blocking us from my relationship with my higher power. Right. Our liquor was but a symptom. We had to get down to causes and conditions. That is a huge statement. My great-grand sponsor is always talking about causes and conditions. For long periods of time in this variety, was unaware of definitions or big ideas that they were talking about. Getting the dictionary, particularly in the context of the big book, has been incredibly valuable for me, right? So cause and conditions, right? What is the condition? The condition is an external circumstance, right? There can be an event, there can be a person or a place or a thing. And we're going to think about this in context of fear, right? And then the cause is my internal reaction, right? So we really need to get down to what triggers me, and when I get triggered, how do I react? And that's what we really need to pay attention to. So it says that an inventory is a fact-facing and a fact-finding process. And you think about an inventory, and if you look up in Webster's, not only just this, in Webster's, an inventory is a written detailed list So we're going to write a detailed list on my internal reactions to life. You know, there's going to be some good stuff, but the majority is not going to be pretty, right? You guys got to be patient with me. I love topic specific meetings, and I geek out on it weeks in advance. And then sometimes I just put it in the fifth gear and talk way too fast. We're just going to take a moment, right? So why the inventory? I love this description on 53 of the 12 by 12 in the 4-step. It says, but it is from our twisted relations with family, friends, and society at large that many of us have suffered the most. We have been specifically stupid and stubborn about them. The primary fact of our problem is that we fail to recognize we have a total inability to form a true partnership or friendship with another human being. When I read that, I completely identified. Right? I had friendships and I was good, but I wasn't completely and totally open with anyone. You know, and since I've come into Alcoholics Anonymous and I continue to strive with this process, it's getting better. It's getting better. I don't know if I'm 100% with anyone. You know, I'm just going to call it what it is. You know, but I'm a numbers guy, right? So my percentages are getting better. You know, this is an ongoing process. All right. So the kind of fear that we're talking about here in the inventory is a threat to the basic instincts of my life, like my social instincts, my financial instincts, my security instincts, sexual instincts, right? If I feel that those are threatened, right? If one of those conditions, one of those external circumstances comes in, I kind of have this geared response, which is that internal reaction, you know, and that's really what I'm trying to look at when I do a 4-step. When I was probably about 9 months sober. My sponsor told me we're going to a convention, and I was 19 years old. I'm like, that sounds awesome. You know, because convention me was like you stayed up all night, you party, maybe you hook up with someone. Like it's sobriety with the road being very wide. And we get up to about maybe Dixon, and he's like, so it's a book study convention. What does that mean? He's like, we're going to sit and listen to these two guys read the big book to us for all weekend. I was like, you have got to be kidding me, dude. I'm going to take a train home. But I did, and I go. Right. And I go and I listen to these old guys, one from Texas, one from Oklahoma, talk about the big book. And at that point, I was at this point in the big book. I was on 65, and I was reading the format of the 4-step, right? And I got really, really confused, right? So if we look at the 4-step, and it's gonna be the same format for resentment as it is for fear, it's a 3-column process, right? It has the first column being I'm resentful at, second column is cause, and third is affects mine, right? And I read that, but I just thought it out too hard. And I really thought I was just going to write out like a biography. Like I was going to tell my 4 sponsor my 80-page, you know, 4-step, just like, here's me. And these are the highlights of my 3rd grade class or whatever. And that's not it at all. Right. And so listening to these two guys, they broke down the simplicity of this, that we were going to come down to causes and conditions, and that I was really going to focus on those things that threaten my internal well-being, right? And when I get threatened, I react typically in 2 different ways. One, it is, for me, it's primarily fear. My fear will often turn into resentment. You know, fear for me is it is the big umbrella in which all my other character defects, I'm just speaking for myself, all my character defects, like self-pity, selfish, self-seeking, righteousness, ego, all that stuff falls underneath the place of fear. Fear that either I'm going to lose something that I already have, that I covet, or that I'm not going to get something I think I deserve or that I need, right? So in getting into the fear component of the 4-step, it breaks down to, is it okay if I show this sheet? It's not AA approved. Okay.
Sorry
Yeah.
for those online, you can't see it.
Yeah, yeah. 4 columns, right? Yeah. And the first one being, I am fearful of, right? And in working this 4-step, the process works in columns. So on my first, on the first big ones, always do it up and down, never across, man. Never across, because if I go across, I'm just complaining. I'm really not getting to the facts of the situation, right? So really what I'm looking for in the first one is, what am I fearful of? You know? The second one is, why do I have this fear? You know, what is being threatened here? And then the third one is the exact details of like what part of self is caused in my fear on the third. You know, is it part of my social security, of my financial security, of my ambition, you know, my personal relationship, my sexual life, hidden or acceptable, you know? And then the fourth one, and this is where the sponsor earns his weight in gold, is, and what was my part? You know, and that's really where my focus needs to be, right? So I on my first one, it was just, my sponsor said, let's write a lot, talk a lot, you know, and if it's irrelevant, then we'll just pass over it. So I tried to put down every person, every situation, every institution that I was afraid of, you know. And in the beginning, I just couldn't wrap my head around the fear is something that I have, but it was that corrosive thread that interwove the entirety of my life, you know. And still to this day, that is it on a daily basis. You know, I mean, the road has gotten very, very narrow, but that is the biggest one that I deal with. And my fears, ultimately, I get angry because I'm afraid, right? And then my resentments come from prolonged anger, you know. So my sponsor had me write down who I was afraid, and then ask that question, why do you have this fear? You know, so let's say, we're gonna read what I wrote out last Friday, right? So give you context, I've been married 32 years, all in on my wife, love my wife to death, but I still struggle in personal relationship, right? My wife and my daughter are big in the horses, and they do horse shows all around the United States, and this is that time of year where they travel, right? So I'm sitting at home, and it's the second weekend I'm home alone by myself, and I'm like, it sucks. I should get a roommate. Like, my wife's been gone a total of 4 days, right? And my head goes to, I should get a roommate, you know, being right? And I really try to keep my finger on the pulse of my spiritual, my emotional well-being, to when there is like a disturbance in the force like that, I'm like, what is going on? Where is this coming from? Because usually, like, I am all in on my wife, you know. And so I break out with this sheet. I'm a huge fan of the 10-step, which what this whole process ultimately flows in. So when there is a disturbance during the day, I'm not losing any more hours. I'm not losing any more days out of fear or out of resentment, right? So moving left to right on this sheet, Camber, my wife, was the heading. But I'm fearful that she's traveling a lot, she's working a lot, and I'm home alone, right? Why do I have this fear? I'm afraid of being left out, left behind. I'm afraid she's moving on. And when pen goes to paper, my fears go from being this huge, expansive, yet can't touch thing to the details, the reality. And when I wrote that down, afraid she's moving on, it made me smile because we are all in together, and this is just about me. And then I immediately was able to identify that this fear is creating self-pity, right? So, but I need to identify, right? It's that 25-75% rule in Alcoholics Anonymous, where we have to identify the problem and not dwell in it, and we'll give it 25% at best, but then 75 is going to be the solution, right? So I asked myself at that point, how is this fear affecting me, right? And in this third column, there are social instincts. And under social instincts, there's my self-esteem. How do I feel about this? Being home alone. I'm an incredibly social person. I'm out all the time. I have irresponsible amount of sponsees, huge friend group. I mean, it's it. So maybe there are times where like things get quiet and I don't have balance. So it affected my self-esteem. My personal relationship with her internally, absolutely. Was she aware? No, man, none of this had been verbalized or I had to act it out, right? Which is the progress. In the beginning of my sobriety, like when I was acting out in fear of resentment, it was verbal, it was loud, it was ugly. And as that road has gotten narrow in my sobriety, it's gotten better. But I want to get to a point where eventually this shit isn't going down. That's unrealistic, but I'm gonna work. When they talk about striving for perfection, I'm in on that. I will settle for progress, but I'm all in. Like I've drank the Kool-Aid on this whole Alcoholics Anonymous process. So on the third column, I check off. Does it affect my security instinct emotionally? Absolutely. My acceptable sexual relations? Yeah. Because when I get like this in self-pity, I will be a man of silent scorn, right? And I will quietly, punish is a big word, but like just like go to sleep early, right? With intent of trying to hurt someone's feelings, right? My wife's feelings. That I don't want to be that dude, right? So this stuff needs to be dealt with before she comes home on Sunday. I'm doing this on Friday, right? How does this affect my ambitions? Yeah, it made me doubt myself. In the moment of that unrealistic fear, I'm like, we are now empty nesters. She's out living her best life, and I'm going to get left behind. But if I think about the last 32 years, my relationship with her, my family life, that's just not the case, right? So I get down to what I consider to be like the most important column, and that is looking at the exact nature of my wrongs, right? What was my part in this interaction in my head with my wife, who is totally unaware that we are not getting along, right? Have you ever been in a situation like that in a relationship? The other person's like, is something going on? And it couldn't be more correct, but you'll be like, no. So it asks 4 questions. Am I being selfish actively right now? 100% check. Am I being dishonest? I am being dishonest through omission by not telling the truth. I haven't told any lies, but I haven't told the truth, right? She has called me. She called me that day, and I was pretty quiet. I was not kind and loving. Was I self-seeking and frightened? Absolutely, man. This whole thing came from fear of being left behind, right? Was I being inconsiderate when I'm treating her with disrespect by not communicating better? Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm left with this information. It has absolutely nothing to do with her. Nothing has changed in the relationship. Everything is up inside my head. So I step back and I'm like, what is going on? At that point, I had not been to a meeting in 2 days, which is an absolute necessity. But if there is a combination of stuff, I had not slept well. I had surfed double sessions for 2 days. I was super tired. And it led up to me being vulnerable, right? So when I do, and this transfers into the daily 10 step for me, this process I'm talking about right now. Like, so if this stuff comes up at work, at home, with friends, wherever, instead of, I've lost days and weeks and months in AA, in card carrying member time of Alcoholics Anonymous, around sobriety, around resentment and fears. But then when I really started taking this process into 10, it was a game changer. And I just started losing maybe hours, not days. Right. So once I realized that I'm in this place of selfishness and self-centeredness, on page 68, there's the 4-step prayer. And it's, God, please remove my fear and direct my attention as what you would have me be and what you would have me do. And then in 7 minutes, Alan Kay, brand new guy who's totally struggled with AA, but is doing everything right, and he calls me up. He's like, I just got a call from a newcomer. I'm gonna go help him. I don't know what to do. I'm getting on my bicycle to ride over to his apartment. I'm like, I'm in. I will be there in 20 minutes. And and in the fact of moving towards being of love and service, that fear and that experience I had with my wife was gone, and I had been relieved. We get to the newcomer's house. Funny little story. He's a guy who struggled with the physical sobriety, right? We go into his bedroom, and this is the total insanity of alcohol. He had built a physical altar out of wood, candles and everything, and put a bottle of Jameson full in the altar, with the idea that he would just look at it every day and be like, God, keep me away from that. And on Thursday night, he drank it. And, my first response was like, that's insane. Mal, how about you put something that's kind of loving in the altar, man, not a bottle of booze. So he brought that up. We agreed that'd be good. No more alcohol in the house. And we went to the meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And then I saw him the next night, and the next night, and the next night. And now he's on his way. So everyone was taken care of. Alan was participating in his first 12-step call. Chris hasn't had the drink since then. And Cameron was relieved of fallacy fear that just came out of nowhere. I can't control the first thought, but this is the process for getting rid of it. So a different approach. I hope it spoke to you guys. I am all in on talking about this. I've got extra forms if you guys want them. It really works for me. So thanks for having me.